Hi, everyone. Today's guest with us on That CBD Show is a spiritual life coach. She teaches people how to create great joy and ease in their life. She has discovered that all emotional and even physical imbalance stems from too much control, stuff that gets in your body, too much control of the conditions in your life. So she
attempting
teaches
to
people,
control the conditions.
Yeah, right.
In your, yeah.
So she teaches people how to let go of control and tune in to their own true power. So we are so excited to have her on our show today.
Absolutely.
Please welcome with us Melissa Alexander. Hi, Melissa.
Hi,
Welcome.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you today, and we have so much to talk about, so we're going to just jump right in. Everybody's going to want to hear everything you have to say. First thing we want to know is a little bit about your story, about your path to getting to where you are now, and then from there, how you decided to become a life coach.
Sure. Well, I think like a lot of people who have become life coaches or just helping people in general, it started off a little rocky in early childhood. So my story was basically I grew up in Chicago, born in the late 70s, had a really normal childhood growing up until about the age of 8. And that's when there was a tragedy, an unforeseen accident that happened where my parents were both killed in a plane crash. It was just them two. My father was a pilot, and he was flying his own plane with my mother. And obviously, life changed in an instant from that point. From at a very young age, I started asking myself, deep questions about life, like why are we here? What is death? What's the point of living, and what's the point of what happens when we die? I remember thinking at a really young age, no one really knew, because people would try to console myself and my siblings and tell us different things, but it would be like, God wanted them, God needed them, and just different things. I could tell nobody really knew themselves what happened after life and what death was really all about. So I began a quest for truth, I'd say, in general. I just remember thinking from that point on, like I really wanted to know what life was about. And I lived in fear for a very long time after that, just thinking that, things could happen at any given moment and just big components of your life being taken away. I remember looking at everybody growing up and seeing that everybody had parents and everybody's life seemed really good. And I just felt like, I was given this lot in life that meant I wasn't going to have a good life. So I spent many years in fear, understanding the emotional scale now. I could see that I had moments of joy and moments of happiness, but the majority of my waking moments were spent in a lot of fear and frustration and anger and insecurity and just this lack of stability, not knowing, again, how things come and go in life. I eventually went through college to become a teacher, a classroom teacher. I always wanted to motivate students. About the age of 18 or 19, I started reading Anthony Robbins and just really being consumed and really focused with how to have a happy life, because something inside of me, even though I wasn't happy all the time, something inside of me always said that we're supposed to be happy. I always felt that intrinsically, that we're supposed to be living happy. We're not supposed to be living mostly in fear and in frustration and those lower frequency emotions, and then have moments of happiness. I always knew that I had to tip the scale somehow. I wanted to be mostly living in happiness and having moments of fear, So I would say one of the biggest turning points in my life was when I was in my mid-20s after college. I discovered The Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes, and he brought up a lot of scripture. I was raised in a traditional Christianity, that at one point, one of the churches I went to even told me that my parents were in hell because they weren't baptized into the, Church of Christ or
Wow.
something. And that, I knew they didn't have the answers. So I was seeking on my own. Once I was old enough, to just really branch out and do my own thing spiritually. And Science of Mind really shifted a lot for me because they did use a lot of scripture. Ernest Holmes uses a lot of scripture, but also shows a different perspective of that scripture, and that God is love and the universe. So it's the first time I really started thinking of, the universe and God as a more positive image, and understanding our personal power and our personal connection to God, and that it's really not in outside conditions. I always thought my parents came back, I'd be happy. If this happened, I'd be happy. If this happened, I was always seeking outside conditions, like many people do. If I get a good job, if I make a lot of money, if I, all this stuff to make my life happy. So Science of Mind was definitely a turning point where I started realizing that our power is truly within. That eventually led me to, early, I guess, 2000s when the Secret came out.
Right.
And that was really powerful, and just saying, wow, could we really have and do and be anything we want just by the power of our mind and learning how to focus and understanding, emotions and how the universe responds to us vibrationally. So that led me on a path to where I discovered Abraham Hicks for several years, and then eventually, the teachings of Joshua, which kind of brought it all together in terms of how to really find your happiness from within. And I can say now, in my early 40s, I can genuinely testify that I've got it. I know how to find happiness. I know how to maintain happiness. I know that happiness has always been within and with everybody as well. It's always attainable. And then in those moments of fear, know how to process those fully and how to get right back to them and not be afraid of negative emotion, not be afraid of, outside circumstances happening that are not to our liking, because we can always get back to that natural place of inner balance.
Right. So you have really, in this short amount of time, learned to go from living in fear and control to living in love, and really understanding that there's no one that can control your thoughts. You control what you think about and what you focus on, and that's how you find your happiness, and that's how you're able to have a circumstance happen that initially you might perceive as unwanted, but
Right.
understanding that your perspective on that and how you process and move through it allows you to be happy no matter what's going on around you. Yes.
That's so true, Christy. It's so true, because we can't control the conditions, and that's what I learned at a very early age, that you can't control the conditions. Things are going to happen. Things are going to happen that look like they're wrong, that they shouldn't have happened. But all we have is how we perceive it. And we've heard that said so many ways. 10% of life is what happens to you, and 90% is how you respond to it. So many great leaders, whether they're spiritual leaders or just great thinkers and positive people that are life empowerment coaches or whatever, they're teaching that is that we have the ability to respond, and nobody can get into our minds and think for us or feel for us. And once we get a hold of that and control of that, which is the only thing we can control, is how we feel and how we think, then we're really in control, and we gain that stability that we often look for in other things being in place.
Right. Thinking that you're going to feel something by getting something when you
Yes.
understand that that's not the way it works.
I have a quick question. When you were talking about processing fear, were you understanding, so for me, it wasn't until really I came across Joshua that I started to understand the correlation from fear as the negative emotion to a limiting belief, and then being able to process that limiting belief and understanding what's happening. Were you touching that or understanding that prior to Joshua, or was that also maybe the vehicle that helped you sort of understand what that negative emotion and fear was?
Yeah, I agree. Joshua was the one. I think the teachings of Joshua were the ones that taught me really how to process fear fully. So the teachings of Abraham, I was following for, I'd say, about 5 years before I found the teachings of Joshua. which many people who know both know, of course, that Gary Temple Bodley is as a student of Abraham, and Abraham through Esther Hicks has always said anybody can do this, anyone
Right.
can channel. So, but I was a little leery listening to Joshua at first because I thought, oh no, nothing's better than Abraham.
Right.
Abraham has it all, and there's nothing.
I felt like I
more.
was cheating.
Right. But with Abraham, what I think for me personally, what I realized or what I learned through Abraham is really that I was in control of my thoughts. So I was always able to get off the negative thoughts and bring myself back. But in doing so, I think maybe I was ignoring a lot of the fear. So I was, kind of turning away from it, which is necessary, a tool to know how to do. But then Joshua kind of brought it all together to say, okay, we can do that. We can get off get off those fears and tune to different thoughts and better feeling thoughts and all that. But we really want to process those fears. And I think that's when it all came together for me, is learning to not be afraid of the negative emotion, because now I look at the negative emotion through the teachings of Joshua to say, bring it on. Like, I'm not afraid of it. I want to see what's there. I want to look at those limiting beliefs that are there, and I want to fully process them. The teachings of Joshua really brought that home for me.
Okay. And is that a lot what you do when you work with adults and children as well, one-on-one, where you have someone that comes to you and they want to change their life. They want all this change. Nothing's going right for them, or they feel like, maybe like you did, like, I'm just destined to have a bad life. I'm destined for all these things to happen. And so what you do then is bring them in and help them to to understand what they're thinking about, to look at what their conditions are, and then when something occurs that they perceive as negative, helping them then to find that limiting belief and soften that as they go along. Is that generally what you're doing in your work as a coach?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. So working with individuals, it's funny, the adults are a lot more difficult than the kids. I like to say what Abraham says is that they always want to argue for their limitations.
Right. Yeah.
Because they're stuck in their old ways, And I always tell them, you wouldn't be coming to me if your old ways were working. So let's just look at a different way. But they want to argue, what the problem is. They want to talk a lot about, well, this was what happened, and this injustice was done to me. And with the kids, it's usually, this teacher is really mean, or these other kids are being really mean. But it always, I let them have their say, but it always comes back to, well, let's look at what this condition caused you to feel. Like, where did it put you on the emotional scale? Let's start there. And of course, it's going to be on the lower end. It caused me to feel really frustrated or angry or just completely insecure, or even real low in powerlessness and despair. So once they identify that, then I make it very clear to them, okay, now traditionally we want to look at that condition and change that condition in order for us to come back up the emotional scale, to feel better. But now what we're learning to do is to say, we don't need that condition to change. We don't need that person to change. It's a lot harder to try to change those behaviors or those conditions than to change your own perspective. And once we can identify the limiting beliefs that are around, that trigger, that fear, and then they can, like you said, soften it, soothe ourselves, talk our way out, and then our perspective changes so that they get the ultimate goal, which is feeling better. And then they realize, wow. And then that's when I see the little, the younger kids. I work with a lot of middle school kids, and their eyes light up when they realize, wait, I have the ability to feel better, and which is what I want, without having to get anybody else involved.
Right.
And that's empowerment.
Yeah, it is. And when you start to see it differently, I do know it's not that you necessarily expect the external conditions to change, but I know for me, sometimes immediately, when I can soften a limiting belief that, I'm not capable of that, or I'm not the right person for that group of friends, or, I'm not good enough for that, whatever it is, I'm not worthy of their love or their respect because I don't have the right credentials, whatever that limitation is. If I can soften that, many, many times, almost instantly, something will happen to show me that externally that condition has changed a bit. There has been some shift in that external condition. And when you really start to see that happen, it's amazing. And I'm sure with the kids, that just a little bit of softening, and they see that, some of their external conditions actually change, which is fun.
They do. And I always point that out. I say you'll see things change, but obviously that's not the reason why you're doing it. You're not doing
Yeah.
it to make things change. You're doing it so you can feel better. But as a natural result of you raising your own vibration, then you're now at a different point of what you're attracting.
Right.
So you're not going to be attracting things that make you feel fearful. And the kids do notice that, and they point it out, and it's amazing. I had one girl one time saying how her older sister was so mean to her all the time. Her sister was like 17 or 18, and this was a 7th grader. And I told her, make a list of 10 things that you like about your sister. And she was like, oh, do I have to?
Yeah, right.
I'm like, anything you want. And she's like, okay, fine. So, reluctantly, she was writing things like, she has pretty hair and she knows how to do her makeup well. And she's, just little things that she could find that she could think positively about it. And I told her, I said, your only work to do is to feel these things when you think about your sister, instead of always thinking, my sister is terribly mean to me and all this stuff. I'm like, you're going to now shift your energy to these things about your sister. So she was willing to work with it. I'll never forget, a week later, she came running in, because at the time I was seeing this group once a week in the Scottsdale school districts. And she came running in the next week, and she's like, my sister has been so nice to me all week long.
Awesome.
And I said, well, that's not a coincidence. Like, you've literally changed your vibration around how you think about this situation, and your sister had no idea you were doing it. And there you go. And you did that work. You can applaud yourself. So how hard would it have been to try to talk to your sister and convince her to be nicer to you and, and all this stuff? It doesn't work that way. And that's where everybody spends their efforts and their energy. And it never quite works out when we try to control conditions, and it just adds to stress within the body that does cause emotional pain and even physical pain if it's not fully processed and addressed.
Right, exactly. So it is, essentially you're just teaching people that this is a feeling reality. And the only time we ever want anything is that we think when we have it, we'll feel better. If this person loved me, I would feel better. If I got that car, I would feel better.
If I had this money, I would be better.
And the only reason you want your children to be happy is because if they're happy, you will feel better. But we've started to understand through this work that you have to feel better first. When you feel better first, when you feel good, then the outside conditions begin to change and shift. So Melissa and I and Drew are all in a group together on Facebook. We met Melissa through doing a spiritual boot camp together in the Joshua program. And Melissa posted something that I just love because, as you know, and a lot of people know, Drew and I have a daughter who's now off at college. But for so many years, we would get involved in her projects at school and try to make them better or perfect. And so a month or so ago, Melissa posted a picture of some cupcakes that were adorable, obviously baked and iced by someone who had never really done cupcakes before, right? They're all different sizes and the icing is everything, and they were precious. And Melissa posted, I've always tried to perfect everything that my daughter did. And now in this new approach to life of less control and less fear, I've allowed her to do the cupcakes the way she wanted to and to do them herself. And it made such a difference. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, just that time a little bit, and how that went for you and your daughter and what that meant to her.
Yeah, that was great. I don't know if she was even aware of it as much as I was, but I did notice, that I was in this habit of perfecting things for her. Little things like, she would do something, I said, oh, make it this way. And it was, like you said, it was all because we think if our children have something beautiful, they're going to feel better. We're going to feel better. It's all about controlling, trying to control conditions, really, even if it's good, well-meaning. But in that moment, I caught myself. I remember I saw her doing them, and I wanted to just reach over and help. And I don't know if she even noticed or not, but I just held back, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. This is her creation, and she can love it, and it's perfect as it is. It doesn't have to be perfect. And she's 10 now, so she has been able to say and notice, as she's grown up, to say, you always want, me to be so perfect. So she wears her hair like real messy, and it's everything I can do to just not want to comb it,
Right.
or perfect those cupcakes. And, but then I realized it's so much better for me, first of all, to just see them as perfect, because they were perfect.
They were beautiful,
her.
right?
And they were. It's all my own perception that they're not good enough, or they're not perfect enough, and I want her to have the best of everything and whatnot. But even her hair, I've let that go. It's like, if you want to wear your hair with a big knot in the head, fine. If you're okay with it, I'm okay with it. And so, just that aspect of parenting, we want to control so much. But I agree with you, Christy. It all comes down to, really just wanting ourselves to feel better. Even when we discipline our kids or make them behave in supermarkets or whatever, we think we say, oh, it's better for them to learn. But no, it's better for us, because then nobody's judging us.
Right.
It always
Exactly.
comes down. And that's what the whole hair thing is. It's like, I don't want, if I'm really honest with myself, it's because I don't want people thinking that I'm a bad mother that
Right.
doesn't teach her kid how to comb her hair,
Right.
or things like that.
It's a reflection on
let
you.
all that,
Yeah.
it's a reflection on me, exactly. And when as I'm releasing that control with my daughter, I can just see her blossoming so much more. I mean, I've always let her be for the most part, but even more so without even going into those little things that seem insignificant, like cupcakes or something like that.
Cupcakes or hair, right? So that leads me to something that I am very interested that you do, and it's so perfect knowing you like I do. It's such a perfect thing for you, and that is this youth empowerment program that you have embarked on. And I think everybody would like to hear, what you're doing and how that's going. What is that like?
Yeah, so it's basically it's an 8-week program, and it goes through starting with the emotional scale, understanding what emotions are, and really starting from that new framework of that we are in control of our emotions. We're never in control of outside conditions, and that we can move ourselves up and down the emotional scale by what we're choosing to focus on. So if I had known that starting in middle school, oh my goodness, I'm not going to say there's any mistakes in life, and I'm glad everything happened the way it did, but I also understand what a powerful tool that is to get in the hands of kids at a young age, so that they can really have this leg up, so to speak, in life, to say, I'm in control from the beginning, and I understand what emotions are about. So it goes through that. Right now, I'm doing it in the Phoenix school districts. I've also taught it in the Scottsdale school districts a couple weeks back. But what I'm really looking to do is implement it at a much larger scale within the schools by doing, video conferencing, and where I don't have to physically be there at each school, where I can get multiple schools, at one time. But essentially where it's around is the whole child model. And I think most public schools these days have adopted and leaned more towards that whole child, because they know that, academic success is one thing, but they're also understanding in this day and age that if they don't have the emotional stability and, the mental stability, if they're not doing good inside, they're not going to be performing well outside. So, whether the school's intentions are all at the end to get their, academic grades up, I don't know, but I do know that schools are open to the whole child model, which basically empowers the child, and it's around mental health issues, all that stuff, to help the child learn that they really are in control. And kids don't know that yet, and I see that light, like I said, go on when they realize, wait, I can control this situation, I can control how I feel without having to make these outside conditions change, and that's really empowering for kids, and I see how helpful it is to them, and realizing and accepting that I can't control the conditions that I live in. I can't control how my parents behave, I can't control how my teachers behave, how other students behave, but I can control how I feel. And just starting there is huge. It really is. It leads them into life and into young adulthood at a very different level than just being scared and confused and not sure of how they're getting what they get in life.
Yeah, that's excellent. It's just excellent. I mean, for Christy and I, so much has been just unlearning, what's been taught to us, and then,
Yes.
It's been reawakening to what emotions are, because even those get taught out of children. Don't think that way, or you're acting up too much, or
Don't cry.
Yeah, don't cry. And really that should be embraced what those emotions are, because that's their guidance system. It's just how to process that. So that's
guidance
just
system.
tremendous that you're, and this isn't goofy stuff. This isn't fake. This is real stuff. These are real things that the children should know, and there's no solution you're going for. It's to have a happy life, whatever direction that is, that you go. You're not really trying to solve anything. I think it's terrific.
Right. Yeah. I think if you ask anyone what they want for their children or themselves, probably the number one answer you get is to be happy. Just no one really understands how to do that. And we are always taught, even as kids, wait for Christmas. Right? There's do all of these things, be good.
Yeah, right.
If you're good, if you behave in a certain way, if you treat people in a certain way, you're then worthy of love. You're worthy if you be something.
Yeah.
If you be a certain way. And so, then we're taught the same thing now. If I have this degree, if I'm successful financially, if my daughter is a success, then I'm somehow worthy. And so I think teaching them younger that they are worthy just because they are here, why that is, and that then they have this emotional system. The emotions aren't bad or good. They're just telling them if they are on their path or not. And if you're feeling bad, you're maybe not quite on the path to where you want to go. So just do the things, the tools we give you to slide yourself back up to being happy, not to achieve anything other than how you feel inside. By feeling great, then everything that you truly want will come to you. And that's just an incredibly powerful tool. I love it.
Yeah. And of course the schools, their main mission is to get, good school grades. They want their kids to succeed academically. But again, they are looking at the background things that are causing. It's not just, if there is bad behavior, sure, but why? And, I think it's our generation of parents now with the kids in there, we're looking at, we don't just want our kids to become doctors and lawyers and make good money. No, we want them to be happy. And,
right.
And we know that there's a little bit of controversy in the schools with the clip up or clip down chart, where it's like, if you're being good, you're up here. If you're being down, you're down here.
Right.
But I really want to replace that and put the emotional scale in there instead of a clip up and clip down chart, and say, let's see where the kid is at and work with that first, because then everything great happens.
That's awesome. That's great. Melissa,
and I know with that, we've got to close out. But
we do. It's been great having you on today. Thanks for being with us.
We're going to come back and have you back on
We
again.
are. We're going to have you back on again. Your website has been up. Thanks, everybody, for being with us on That CBD Show. See you next time.